The 2024 season for the Cincinnati Bengals is officially over. It got a lot closer than I expected and actually a lot of fans expected. It came down to the last week, week 18, where the Bengals had a clinch scenario. Cincinnati did everything that they could later in the season, winning 5 straight, finishing the season 9-8, hoping it would be enough to make it to the playoffs. That happened this past Saturday where we beat the Steelers in Pittsburgh. And then it all came down to this Sunday. We needed the Dolphins to lose one more game, and we needed the Broncos to lose their last game of the season to the Kansas City Chiefs. The Dolphins did their part in losing the games. The Broncos, on the other hand, did not. It got look how close it actually got. I'm gonna go to the big screen real quick. We talked about this for a few weeks now on what Cincinnati needed to happen to make the playoffs. It's extremely close. It's crazy how close we got. Everything that Cincinnati had to do, they did. 5-game win streak, that does include us beating the Cowboys. But from the Cowboys on, we didn't lose a single game. Beat the Cowboys, beat the Titans, beat the Browns, beat the Broncos, then beat the Steelers. The Colts did what we needed them to do. We needed them to lose at least 2 games. They did that, lost to the Broncos, and then lost to the Giants last week. Dolphins as well needed to lose 2 of their last 4 games, lost to the Texans, and then in the final week 18, what they needed to do was lose to the Jets, and Aaron Rodgers pulled off likely his last game of his career, beat the Dolphins. So the Dolphins lost the second game that we needed to lose, and it all came down to the Broncos losing their last game to, the Cincinnati Bengals' newest rival, the Kansas City Chiefs. And the Kansas City Chiefs decided to basically play their practice squad. It was very apparent that the Kansas City Chiefs that game didn't matter to them. They already had the 1 seed locked up, which is why it was really important that the Chiefs were to lose a second game. That's why we needed them to lose to the Steelers or needed them to lose to literally anybody else. Because if they didn't have the 1 seed locked up going into the last week, they would have had to win against the Broncos to get the first seed, because if they lost to the Broncos, meaning they would have 3 losses on the season instead of 2, that means the Bills would have got the 1 seed and the Chiefs would have had to eventually go on the road, maybe. But because they beat the Steelers on Christmas, they decided to sit their starters, and the Broncos won. It was like 38-0. So literally everything we needed to happen within the last 4 weeks of the regular season happened, except the very last thing. It literally came down to the very last game. And it was the Chiefs. The Chiefs have now technically knocked Cincinnati out of the playoffs 3 straight years. Going back 4 years ago, obviously we beat the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, ended up losing the Super Bowl. The next year we lost to the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. Last season, lost to the Chiefs in the regular season, which eliminated us from the playoffs. And in this season, the Chiefs basically eliminated us because they lost to the Broncos. And I'm not going to say it's the Chiefs' fault that we didn't make the playoffs. I'm not saying they lost on purpose so that we didn't get in the playoffs, but you could very easily tell watching that game they did not want to win, and they didn't care what happened. It was not a competitive game at all. So it is now officially the offseason for the Cincinnati Bengals. Yes, it's definitely one of the most disappointing seasons the Bengals have ever had. Probably the most disappointing season they've ever had, considering we went into this season with Super Bowl expectations. Now we're not even in the playoffs. And there's a lot of stuff to go over in the offseason, including today. There was a bunch of coaches fired today. That's not what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be celebrating the little bit of victories that we had this season. Even though we didn't make the playoffs, it was still a great season for a lot of individual players, and that's what this video is going to be about. So, without further ado, let's jump into the big 3 in Cincinnati who proved that they need to be signed. Obviously, Jamar Chase, Trey Hendrickson, and Joe Burrow. Every single one of them had a career year. Joe Burrow, his best season of his career. Trey Hendrickson, his best season of his career. Jamar Chase, his best season of his career. The main focus is now, obviously in the offseason, is re-signing players, extending players, free agency. Joe Burrow is already on contract. Jamar Chase, this is the offseason where we have to extend him. He has one more year on his contract, his rookie contract. He has one more year left. But after rookie contracts, after their fourth year is when they usually get the extension. Obviously, he was trying to get it last offseason, and it looks like the Bengals should have extended him last offseason because now the price is going to be a whole lot higher than it was last season. I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then Trey Hendrickson, he is under contract for one more season. So this is the offseason where contract extensions are going to be talked. And all three of these players have said they want to stay in Cincinnati for the rest of their careers. They're just looking for that long-term deal to guarantee that they can stay in Cincinnati for the proper amount of money. But that's more off-season talks. First, we're just going to talk about what they were able to do in this 2024 season. First, talk about the quarterback, Joe Burrow. Put up MVP numbers in the 2024 season. Passing yards, 918, first in the NFL. Passing touchdowns, 43, first in the NFL. Completion percentage, 70.6, fifth in the league. And then a QBR, 75. That is his career high QBR. And if you don't know what QBR is, it's a metric to basically, it stands for quarterback rating. So you're basically rating the quarterback. It's out of 100. 50 is average. 75 is an excellent quarterback. And then 25 is a below average quarterback. So this is Joe Burrow's career high QBR, and then also puts him in the category of on the QB rating an excellent quarterback. So Joe Burrow obviously had an amazing year. If we made the playoffs and if we probably won a few more games, Joe Burrow is likely the 2024 MVP. He still has a case for it. Obviously led the NFL, like I just said, in passing yards and passing touchdowns. And with one of the worst defenses and one of the worst offensive lines this season, he still won 9 games and put up those numbers. Absolutely outstanding. It's such a shame how well all three of these players played and we didn't get to see them in the playoffs. But they balled out. Next, we're going to talk about Trey Hendrickson, who I think deserves way more resignation than he gets. He's severely underrated, not talked about in the media enough. Trey Hendrickson in 2024 led the league in sacks with 17 and a half, back-to-back seasons where he has had 17 and a half sacks, sack yardage, which means the amount of yards the teams lost when Trey Hendrickson sacked him overall the entire season. 126, first in the NFL. Tackle for loss, 19, tied for second in total tackles. 46 total tackles, career high for Trey Hendrickson. Once again, Trey Hendrickson had his best season of his career. Led the lead in sacks, likely should be the defensive player of the year. Most likely the betting favorite is going to go to Pat Surtain for the Denver Broncos, but I think it clearly should be Trey Hendrickson. As it's been shown, defensive player of the year for the last decade, it seems, has always been defensive edges. It's become pretty much like the MVP is a quarterback award. The defensive player of the year award is usually an edge award. The one year it's not going to be is when Trey Hendrickson should have won it. I don't even think he's second. It goes Pat Surtain is the betting favorite, then TJ Watt is second, and then Trey Hendrickson. And that's just, it baffles me. I don't understand that. I really don't. Both players are phenomenal players, but I don't think Trey Hendrickson gets nearly talked about enough with how great of a player he is. And he had the best season of his career. Trey Hendrickson deserves Defensive Player of the Year. Finally, the best season out of all of them, Jamar Chase. Receiving yards, 1,708, first in the NFL. Receptions, 127, first in the NFL. Receiving touchdowns, 17, first in the NFL. Making him the Triple Crown winner, and yards per game, 106. Also first in the NFL. Jamar Chase becomes the 5th player in the modern NFL era to win the Triple Crown after Cooper Kupp won it in 2021. The first, it's actually crazy how fast the Triple Crown winner happened after Cooper Kupp. Before Cooper Kupp, it was Steve Smith Sr. back in 2005. So Cooper Kupp won the Triple Crown in 2021. Before that, it was 2025. And the fact that Jamar Chase did it so soon after Cooper Kupp is actually insane. But the fact that he even did it in general is insane, including he didn't get his first touchdown until week 3 against the Commanders in that primetime Monday night game. But after a slow start, after not practicing for the offseason because he was in contract negotiations, Ja'Marr Chase has his best season, earns every single penny he's going to get, whatever the deal is that Cincinnati works out. He deserves every single bit of it, winning the Triple Crown, being the youngest player in NFL history to win the Triple Crown. If you don't know what the Triple Crown is, it means he's first in receiving yards, receptions, and receiving touchdowns. And he won all 3 of them very comfortably. Receiving yards, he pretty much 200 more than the next player. Receptions, I think about 10 more than the next player. And touchdowns, it was about 4 more than the next player. After the Steelers game with another slate of games on Sunday, Ja'Marr Chase was already pretty much guaranteed locked up that he was going to win the Triple Crown. And it was pretty much guaranteed locked up a few weeks ago that he was going to win the Triple Crown with how he was playing. He also ties the single-season franchise record of 17 touchdowns with Carl Pickens for the Bengals. He had, even in the interview he talked about after the Steelers game, it should have been 19. The last 2 weeks he did drop 2 touchdowns, which obviously in the grand scheme of things really doesn't matter. We won both games, and it didn't matter anyways because we didn't make the playoffs. But Ja'Marr Chase had an amazing season. And what I think of even crazier, if there was a Triple Crown for defensive edges, Trey Hendrickson was really, really close to getting that as well. He was number 1 in sacks, number 1 in sack yards, and then tackle for loss. He was only 3 away from tying number 1. So number 1 was Myles Garrett with 22 tackles for loss, and then number 2 was tied between T.J. Watt and Trey Hendrickson for 19. If he got 4 more tackles for loss, Trey Hendrickson would have technically had the Triple Crown for the defensive edge. But after all of these seasons, Mr. Joe Burrow having his best season of his career, and the Bengals having the passing leader, the passing touchdown leader, the sack leader, and the receiving yards leader, reception leader, and receiving touchdowns leader, all of that turned out to be a 9-8 record and missing the playoffs for the second straight year. And this is the first time Joe Burrow has missed the playoffs with a 100% healthy season. This was the first time in his career where he's been healthy the whole season and didn't make the playoffs. Now that the season is over, like I said, there's a lot of off-season stuff that has to be talked about, including a fire today that I'll be talking about tomorrow. Going deep into it, defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo has been fired after 2 straight seasons of being bottom tier defenses. Zach Taylor and the front office decided it was time to part ways with Lou. And tomorrow I'll be talking about potential candidates. I think it's pretty straightforward. Bengal fans and the rumors of who it should be. I keep hearing the same 2 names I'm going to be talking about tomorrow, but the names are Dennis Allen, former head coach of the Saints, and then Robert Saleh, former head coach of the Jets. Both defensive-minded coaches, both former DCs, and would both be huge pickups for the Cincinnati Bengals. But thank you so much for watching the Bengals Digest channel. Unfortunately, the season is over. We have to wait until August, until the next time we get to see the Bengals play again. But it was a fun season nevertheless. How it started and how it finished, I'm not happy with the season, but I can appreciate it for what it was, considering at one point we were 0-3, then we were 1-4, and then we were 4-8. And even though, despite that being 4-8, we finished the season winning 5 straight, finishing 9-8. Joe Burrow had the best season of his career. Ja'Marr Chase had the best season of his career. Trey Hendrickson had the best season of his career. There was a lot to celebrate in this year, but there was also a lot to be disappointed about. But we're going to have a lot to talk about this offseason. Mock drafts are going to be coming up. I've probably already done 10 mock drafts today. I'm going to be talking about what free agents are going to be available in 2025, and I think that we should go and get. I think Cincinnati should be, and we have to be very aggressive in free agency. Cincinnati hasn't been a team known to draft very well. I could argue that within the last few years, our drafts have actually turned out pretty well. But historically, we haven't been a drafting team, so I think we need to be aggressive in free agent. Go get guys who have been proven. to be great NFL talents and then put them on the defense or the offensive line, and then go win the Super Bowl next season in 2025. But thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like this video, comment on what you think the Bengals should do what do you think their first thing should do this offseason outside of firing any coaches, because that has already happened. What should they do next? And don't forget to subscribe to the Bengals Digest channel, especially in the offseason, because this is going to be, I feel like, going to be a crazy offseason for the Bengals. So subscribe so you can get all the videos here on the Bengals Digest channel. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Carson Lokey. Good night, and God bless.